Hi, this is DrumWise Meets, and today I'm with a drummer who's played for the likes of Shirley Bassey, Leo Sayer, and he's played on many West End shows. Elliott Henshaw. Hi, Elliot.
How you doing? You all right?
Thanks for joining us today. My first question for you is, what equipment are you currently using?
Well, I'm a Ludwig endorser, so at the moment I'm using the Keystone X on the Ludwig Keystone X on all my live stuff. Well, sort of the live stuff that's kind of more rocky poppy kind of feels. So with Leo Sayer, I'm using 22 kick with 12, 13, and 16 toms, and I've got the 110th anniversary Ludwig Black Beauty snare drum that I use on that gig, and I have an auxiliary snare on the left hand side, which is a 14 by 8, I think it is, Ludwig Colosseum from the 60s, a really nice old drum there. So that's what I use with Leo. Cymbal wise, Zildjian endorser, always have been. I've been endorsing with them for over 10 years now, but I've never bought any other cymbals. Why would I? That's my opinion anyway. So Zildjian's both in the studio here and with and obviously live. And live when I play sort of the more big band stuff, which a lot of people kind of know me for. I've got an old Ludwig. What the hell is it? From the 60s. My brain's gone dead. What would be an old Superphonic?
Yeah,
an old Ludwig Superphonic, and that's a 20, 13, 16. And I've got an array of old Ludwig snare drums. I've got a Ludwig Pioneer that I'm looking at right now in front of me from 1959. Oh. And I've got a Ludwig 400, obviously a Ludwig 404. And I've got a bunch of, I think at the last count I had 25 snare drums to choose from. Not all of them Ludwigs, but yeah, no, I'm at the happiest I've ever been with the gear I'm using. With Zildjian, I'm using a combination of the Caropes and the K Suite range, which are just they're the best cymbals I've ever played. And they like it because I don't keep going down the factory and asking for more, because I'm just happy with what I've got.
So what was your first drum kit that you ever owned?
That I ever owned? Well, I started playing drums when I was 13, self-taught, and I was playing in my school band pretty much from day one because I was the only kid in school that had any kind of vague sense of rhythm. But the school didn't have a drum teacher, and in those early days, I used to just borrow the school drum kit because my parents wouldn't buy me one until they knew I was serious about it. So the school drum kit then was an old Premier Olympic, which I used to take it home every school holiday, every half term, all that kind of stuff. And then when I was 18 for my 18th birthday, my parents finally got me a kit, which was a Pearl Export, second-hand Pearl Export. And that was, as far as I recall, it was a 20-inch bass drum, it was a 10-inch rack tom, and a 13-inch floor tom, I think, but on a mounted floor tom. And I got myself a Pearl free floating maple snare drum. That's as I recall. And I had a set of Zildjian, I think they were called Shimtar or something like that. You bought them as a pack. You got a set of hi-hats, a ride, and a crash. It was the budget range. But yeah, that was my first setup.
Excellent. Cool. Do you have an all-time favourite drummer? If you just choose one, I mean, that's a hard question, but
it's a really hard question. But if pushed, it's Buddy Rich, because he was the reason I started playing. When I was 11 years old, I was playing saxophone, alto saxophone at school. I was having lessons, and I was really into jazz. And my dad, who knows a hell of a lot about music, he had his ear to the ground, and he said, "Oh, well, there's a really good jazz band coming to our local theatre. We'll go and see them because they've got a really, really good jazz sax player in there." So we went and saw this band, and the band was the Buddy Rich band, and he was talking about Steve Marcus, who was the saxophone player with the Buddy Rich band, who was amazing. But I came out that building going, never mind the sax. I want to play the drums. And that was in November of 1986, and Buddy died in April of 87. So I caught him, you know, there's not many people of my generation, my age, who actually saw Buddy live, you know. And as an 11-year-old, I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard of him, but I knew I was seeing something special, and I didn't know what he was doing. I mean, in fairness, I still don't know how he did what he did or what he's doing, but it changed. It totally changed my life. It sounds a bit cliched, but it did. It changed everything. And I would say from that day until for the next 5 years, all I really listened to was Buddy Rich records. I just was obsessed. And I still trawl YouTube for new footage of Buddy. Yeah. So although, you know, I could easily say, well, my favourite drummer of all time is Vinny or Weckl, who are, you know, they're my biggest heroes. You know, Steve Gadd, even guys over here, people like Mike Smith, who a lot of people won't have heard of Mike Smith, but when I was about 15, he was the drummer with the BBC Big Band, and he was as bigger influence on me at that time as Buddy Rich was, because I was into big band music. I was listening to Buddy Rich and the BBC Big Band, and I got to know Mike really well. He's a very good friend now, but he was a massive influence. But I would say of all time, it has to be Buddy. That, you know, and I'm very lucky to be friends with his daughter now, and Greg Potter. I put on the Buddy Rich Memorial Concert at the Palladium in 2012, which you know, me and my very good friend Toby Cruz organised. You know, and so I've become good friends with the family, and it's you know, I still have to pinch myself that that's actually a thing. You know.
Wow, that must have been an amazing thing to put together.
It was both amazing and the hardest I've ever worked in my life.
Yeah.
Because you know, I obviously never met Kathy. I didn't know who Kathy was. I didn't even know how to get in touch with her. And I knew that she was very strict about who used Buddy's name for any kind of publicity. She owns all the rights to his name and image and all that kind of stuff. So I just went on the internet. Well, the first thing I did was I got in touch with Dave Weckl, who I've got to know quite well just from, I did a bit of teching for Dave Weckl when he used to bring his band over to Ronnie Scott's back in the day. Got to know him quite well. And I went to one of his gigs, hung out with him afterwards, and I said, look, if I can do this, would you be up for getting involved? And he was absolutely, I will. So once I had Dave Weckl sorted out, it was kind of an easier sell. You know, I trawled the internet. I emailed the Buddy Rich fan club, and Kathy, unbeknownst to me, Kathy Rich runs that. And I just emailed it like a forum there and said, does anyone know I can get in touch with Kathy? And she emailed me back, said, this is Kathy, what do you need? And when I first asked her, she was kind of like, well, I don't know you, and you can't do this without my permission, and I'd have to host it. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. We've got a promoter. We've got Dave Weckl, who's ready to go. This is serious. This is not a crank call or anything. And I introduced her to my promoter friend, Toby Cruz, and he worked tirelessly, and I had to work tirelessly booking other acts. Like, we got Ginger Baker on board, we got Ian Pace, we got Gavin Harrison, John Blackwell, God rest his soul. Yeah. We had, who else did we have? Greg Potter, of course, who plays with the Buddy Rich band now, Kathy's partner. Yeah, I mean, we did everything, the two of us. You know, we were totally wet behind the ears. I mean, Toby had promoted stuff before, but, you know, and he'd booked the Palladium before where we did it. So we knew about that side of it. But we were learning as we went along. You know, I was doing promo. I was doing... Ginger Baker's drum tech couldn't get there, so I had to learn how to set Ginger's kit up and tech for him on the day, which is terrifying. And you know, on the day of we had a full rehearsal at not John Henry's, the other place. It'll come to me. Big rehearsal rooms in Bermondsey. The day before, with all the drummers, all the big band. I fixed all the big band, contracted them all. And that went on from sort of 10 in the morning till 6 at night. And then me and Toby and a couple of mates I'd asked to help. We had to load all the drums out there, get them over to the Palladium. I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning on the day of the Palladium concert, getting the music stands, the Buddy Rich music stands from a friend of mine who's got a set of original Buddy Rich music stands, getting all the drums down there, setting my drums up, making sure everyone was happy. You know, I pulled a load of favors, but you know, it was, and then I had to play, you know, that it was like, it got to the point where I went on stage and I was the first guy on, and my head had been somewhere else all day, making sure everyone was happy, setting the stage up, making, you know, printing tickets out, all these kind of things. And then it's like, oh my God, I've got to actually play now, you know, and Dave Weckle's watching and John Blackwell's watching. But it was just amazing. And then once I played, I could relax. And I think I necked about half a bottle of whiskey over the rest of the day. But then right at the end of the concert, there was a drum trio, which I didn't know about. And suddenly I was sat in between John Blackwell and Dave Weckle on Buddy Rich's kit, playing a drum solo with them. And it's like, what the hell is this? Yeah, mad times. But so I've got a lot of history with Buddy Rich. So yeah, sorry, that's a long way of answering who's the guy. But
and this may link quite nicely to my next question, because my next question is, what has been the highlight of your career so far? I mean, from what you told me about, that must be definitely a highlight.
Yeah, it's up there. It's definitely top 3. I guess there's that. There was the first time I played with Shirley Bassey, because it was such a moment. I was still living in Wilmslow in Cheshire, where I'm from, and I was doing I was telling you before about Mike Smith, the drummer with the BBC Big Band, who I became very, very good friends with. And again, he's such a sweetheart, and I urge people who see this, or to check his playing out. He's one of those guys that you will have heard him without knowing you've heard him. He's not a social media guy. He's not a self-promoter. But to me, he's one of the best drummers this country's ever produced. I mean, he's got the touch of Peter Erskine. He's got the swing of Jeff Hamilton. Yet you put him in a pop or rock situation, he's got the groove of somebody like, Ian Thomas or Steve Gadd, or, he's just outstanding. He was taught by the same guy that taught Neil Wilkinson, a guy called Max Abrams from back in the day. And Neil Wilkinson as well has got the same kind of touch as Mike Smith, just fabulous. But Mike Smith, I became friends with because he's an absolute sweetheart, and he kind of took me under his wing. Mike Smith got in touch. I was 25 years old. I'd just come off stage at this amateur dramatic show I was doing, and he said, listen, do you fancy going to Monte Carlo with Shirley Bassey for a couple of days to play with a Parisian orchestra at a big gala event? Are you joking? And, it was a weird experience, because Shirley Bassey, all she takes when she goes abroad is her drummer and her MD, and Mike was her drummer at the time. And he trusted me enough to get that gig together and go out there and depth for him. And, suddenly I was flying business class. I was being treated like a king, in a beautiful hotel in Monte Carlo, working with a big Parisian orchestra and playing Goldfinger with the woman who sang it and Diamonds Are Forever, and at the Sporting Club in Monte Carlo. And the Sporting Club is an amazing venue, because the stage, you start off on stage, and then the stage during the show moves out into the audience, and the roof comes down and the sides go down, and suddenly it's an outdoor gig, and they light fireworks, and you got the Monte Carlo skyline there. And that was a real pinch yourself moment. That was a real highlight, because it was like, wow, I've arrived. And of course, I'm a lot older and wiser now, and you never really arrive in the music industry, because a couple of weeks later, I'm playing it at a wedding or at a working man's club or something. It's one of them. But that was definitely up there. The Buddy Rich Memorial, and I think 2 occasions of running my own band. I run a band called Spice Fusion, which is a big band. I run it with a really good friend of mine, Simon Niblock, and I write a lot of the music for that. Simon's an arranger. He arranges it for the full big band. But the only rule with our band is that there's no swing music, because I grew up listening to big bands, and I love swing music. It's in my heart, but I didn't want it to be another tribute. There's so many great bands out there doing tribute to Ellington, tribute to Bassey, tribute to Buddy. But for me, that music's been done by the guys that did it. If big band music needs to move forward, it has to be something different. And so we said we'll arrange music and write music that's funk, Latin, groove, that kind of stuff. So last year we did a couple of big concerts, one at Cadogan Hall in London and one at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester. Again, my friend Toby Cruz, who promoted the Buddy Rich shows, he promoted those for us. We had 800 people in at Cadogan Hall. We had 600 at the Royal Northern College of Music. And I was on the mic comparing. Simon, my friend who I run it with, he was on the mic comparing. We're playing my tunes that he's arranged with a band full of all our friends. Massive highlight. And on a similar vein, a few years ago, I used to run a smaller group just called the Elliott Henshaw Band, which I'm just finishing off the second album for that band. At the moment, it'll be out later this year. I headlined Ronnie Scott's a couple of times with that band. and to headline Ronnie Scott's under your own name and sell out both times. You know, it's like, well, what's going to top that? You know.
Yeah.
So I've had some highlights, and then everything else. You know, for me, the highlight is sitting behind the kit, playing with great musicians and to great people. Every time I go on stage with Leo Sayer, I have to pinch myself because, and Tony Christie even, who I've just been, as we're here chatting, he's on this morning at the moment, being interviewed, and I recorded a track for him here that they're playing on this morning using Zoom technology that we all the band recorded separately, and that's, you know, Amarillo. It's such a great piece of music, and to play those kind of tunes with the guys that sang them originally is amazing. So, with Leo Sayer, you know, Steve Gadd is on You Make Me Feel Like Dancing. I had to learn Steve Gadd's part to play that with Leo Sayer. Jeff Porcaro's on Thunder in My Heart and When I Need You. It's like, this is mental, you know. So lots of highlights.
Yeah, and trying to copy those guys. And actually, you're great at linking my questions here, Elliot. It's like you're a pro.
Not quite.
So my next question is, when you first get a gig, how do you learn the songs? So yeah, you just said about you know, Leo Sayer there having some incredible drummers playing on the record, and then you then have to try and learn their parts. So do you just listen to it? Do you transcribe it? And also, could you tell us a bit about how that's different with like West End stuff?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So being self-taught, I never learned to read in the early days. Everything was done by ear. So with my school band, it literally used to be I'd fumble my way through the first few playthroughs, then I'd learn it and I'd know what to do and I know what it would. I always had a good ear for what the drum part should sound like. You know, it sounds a little bit big-headed, but you know, I took to it very quickly. I'm not saying I was a natural in the way that, say, somebody like Buddy was obviously a natural and Vinny was a natural, but it made sense to me. I didn't have to think about it too much. You know, there was a hell of a lot of practice involved to get to where I needed to be, but I felt the music quite quickly. So until I was 18, it was all by ear. And then when I got to college, obviously I was obsessed with big band music, and I auditioned for the college big band and didn't get it because I couldn't read the music. They needed somebody who could sight read. So I was furious. So the way I learned to sight read was I used to go to watch Mike Smith with the BBC Big Band. At that point, this is like 1994 now, 95. The BBC Big Band had been made a part-time band rather than full-time. So they weren't recording in London at Maida Vale anymore. They were recording once a week on a Monday at Pebble Mill Studios in Birmingham, which is no longer there. But Birmingham's only about an hour and a half's drive from Manchester. So I'd just bought my first car. So what I did was every Monday, I never had any lectures at college. So I used to drive my car to the BBC. 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd leave. I'd arrive at 9. I'd help Mike load his drums into the studio, and I'd sit behind him all day while he sight read the music they were doing for the BBC Big Band shows. And Mike's the best sight reader I've ever come across. I mean, he literally, there's nothing. You could spill your ink over the page and he'd read it perfectly. Do you know what I mean? It's like some sort of autism he's got. It's mental. But that's how I learned to read. What I used to do was I would watch him interpret the parts, ask all the relevant questions. Then I would go home, and when the show went out on the radio, I would record it, and then I would write down, listen to it again, and write down what I thought that drum part looked like. Not transcribing what Mike was playing, but what I thought that part looked like. And then I would put it on the stand and I'd play along. And I did that every week for a year almost. And that's how I learned to read. So after that, I was very, very reliant on reading because I got very good at reading. I was obsessed with, I need to learn to sight read. And that became my mission. And then what I did find was I relied so much on that my ear went a little bit. Do you know what I mean? It took me longer to, so I had to go back to training my ear to hear things once or twice and then kind of let it sink in. But in those early days, most of the gigs I was doing required me to read. I was doing this professional big band, which was all reading. I was doing shows, both touring, amateur dramatic, and West End a bit later on. But then auditioning for Leo Sayer and getting the Tony Christie gig, there are no parts with those. So it's a learning thing. But the way I learned Leo's set, the way I learn any set really, is it's a combination of the two. I try and keep both in there. So I'll be sent the tracks to learn. I'll listen to them a couple of times. Then I will write out a drum part, not detailed, just a cheat sheet. And then I will start playing them with the chart up there, and I'll read the chart. And then after a few playings, I'll take the chart down, and it'll be in memory then. And when I think about them on the gigs or whatever, I'm not just remembering how the song goes. I'm remembering in my mind's eye what the chart looked like. I'm seeing a visual picture of it. And that seems to work for me. The other thing I do quite a lot, certainly working with singers, is I learn the song. And I'm always singing along. People always say that when I play with the Rat Pack show that I do quite a lot. You know, I know all the words to the Sinatra tunes and the Sammy Davis tunes, and I'm always singing along. And I think if you know the song, you know the part. You know what's coming up. And also, it stops me overplaying, because if I go for a fill and I can't sing the lyric while I'm playing that fill, then it must be getting in the way of the guy who's singing the lyric as well as me. So don't play it.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a lesson that got taught to me very early on by Andy Pryor, the first professional gig I got. He almost fired me because I'd come to this big band who he was the star. He was the top turn. And I was playing like Buddy Rich behind him, you know, playing all over the lyrics. And he took me into the dressing room. He said, if you carry on playing like that, I'm going to fire you. It's as simple as that. He said, go and check out Irv Cutler, who plays with Frank Sinatra, and come back to me. You know, and I went away. We didn't have a gig for a month. And it totally changed the way I played. It was, you know, if anyone hasn't heard of Irv played with Frank for 25 years. And Frank took Irv all over the world with him because he just played brilliant time. He was like the Steve Gadd understated guy for swing drumming. You know, it was just amazing. So, you know, it's a combination of ear and reading. There are still loads of times in my life where I have to read, you know, even doing West End shows. When I learn a show in the West End to dep on a show, again, that's a combination of the two, because depping on a West End show is the hardest thing I think you ever do in music, because you have to go in there with no rehearsal, no sound check, and play it pretty much exactly like the regular guy, because everyone else in that building is used to hearing it the same way 8 times a week. If you come in and try and put your stamp on it and do it differently, it might not be wrong what you're doing, but it's different, and different puts people off who've got into a routine. So you have to do a hell of a lot of homework to dep on a show, which involves, you know, let's be clear, you get sent the part, you get sent a recording, a drum heavy mix, so you can learn the style of the guy you're depping for. So that, again, is a combination of reading the part, also listening to the drum fills that guy plays, the way he interprets the part. But then if you're doing a show that is your show and you're there from day one of rehearsals, you know, you have to go in on day one of rehearsals and have a pretty good go at getting through those charts sight read. You know, nobody's expecting it to be absolutely nailed first time. That's the whole point of the rehearsal. But you don't want to be in there clamming all over the place when everyone else is trying to get through the rehearsal and move on to the next tune, you know. So there are big differences with learning a show for like somebody like Leo or Tony Christie or whatever versus doing a big band gig where it's, you know, like I dep for the Sid Lawrence Orchestra, and I've done the BBC Big Band as well. And literally, you turn up, you do a 5 o'clock sound check for half an hour, maybe top and tail 3 or 4 tunes. The rest of the gig, you are literally turning over the page, not knowing what's coming up next, and you have to sight read it and make it sound like you know what you're doing. And that's a different kind of pressure, but that's what I trained for at college. I took it upon myself that I wanted to do this. Again, still for me, nobody does that better than Mike Smith. You know, he's a one-off.
That would, I mean, I've been reading for a long time, but that would terrify me. Just turning the page.
Yeah. And it still does. It's still, you know, I've been doing that since I was probably doing that kind of gig since I was probably 21, 22, and I'm 45 now, and I still go to every gig where I know I've got to sight read big band music or sight read anything and go, oh, is this the one where I get found out? You know, so I always feel like a bit of an imposter, you know.
But to sum up then, so reading drum music for people that are just starting out or whatever, it's pretty important.
Yeah, I would say that if you want to be, you see, my thing was, I didn't want to be pigeonholed. And when I moved to London, you know, I moved to London, everyone was like, oh, Elliot, yeah, he's the big band guy. And I tried to, and then I got to London, and the first West End show that I did for 4 years was the Rat Pack. So it was still, oh yeah, Elliot, the big band guy. And then for a while it became Elliot, the theatre guy, because I was doing loads of shows. I wanted to be versatile. My heroes were people like Steve Gadd, Vinny, Ian Thomas over here, Ralph Salmons over here, Mike Smith over here. Whereas one minute you can see them doing a trio at Ronnie's, and the next they're playing with Mark Knopfler or touring with Van Morrison, or they're doing a TV show. You know, I just wanted to be versatile, and it's a harder road to follow that because people like to pigeonhole you. They like to put you in a bracket, and to be versatile and put yourself out there as versatile takes a lot longer because you never really get into a clique. You might. There are still people, I'm sure, that I play jazz with that don't know that I play rock and roll or pop. Do you know what I mean? They just think, oh yeah, he's a jazz drummer, and vice versa. But to be versatile, a big part of that versatility is reading, because I would still say today 70% of the money I earn is earned through having to read music, whether it's in a studio doing a TV jingle or a film session, or whether it's doing a big band gig, whether it's doing West End show stuff, sessions from home. Usually people will send me a PDF of the part and a click track, and away you go. You know, it's you know, nobody's saying you have to be a demon sight reader, but being able to read, you will earn so much more money. You really will, you know. But I'm not saying it's the be all and end all. You know, if you choose to, you know, Dennis Chambers doesn't read, Buddy Rich didn't read. You know, if your dream is to form your own band, write your own music, and be the next Ringo Starr, it's not important. But it's what you do till you achieve that dream. You know, for me, I never wanted to be working in a supermarket until my band got signed. I wanted to be playing drums for everyone else until the band got signed. So in order to do that, you just have to. I would say to my students at BIM, say yes to everything. If you can't play brushes, learn how to play brushes, because you don't want to be getting a call to do a background jazz gig on a Tuesday night in a Park Lane hotel and having to turn it down because you can't play that style of music, because you're turning down possibly 250 quid on a Tuesday night. Who can afford to turn that down? You know.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, that's great. Really nice answer. Thanks. And actually, just on the theatre thing, quickly, it must be quite a hard job to be on a full-time theatre show, because the amount of shows you have a week and so on. How does it work, like days off and stuff like that?
So when you take on a West End show, yeah, it's 8 shows a week, usually 2 matinees and 6 nights. You get 1 day off, usually a Sunday. But you are still freelance. Although you sign a contract for the theatre show, you're still considered a freelance player and a self-employed drummer. And the great thing about that is you are allowed to dep shows out. So with most shows, there's usually a fixer, what's called a fixer, who's the guy that books you. He's like an agent. So a production company will want to put on a show, and they will contact a fixer and say, right, for this show we need piano, bass, drums, keyboards, 2 violins, trombone, trumpet. They'll tell him what they need. And that fixer will have guys on his books who he will call. Usually what he will do is he will contact the musical director or the musical supervisor first and say, are there any particular guys you want working for you on this show? And they'll have their favourites the same way anyone does. You know, they'll say, oh, can you book this guy on drums, or ask this guy on lead trumpet first, or whatever. And the general rule that the Musicians Union stipulate is that when you take on a show, you have to be there at least 50% of the time, 60% of the time, I believe it is actually. You need to be, your face needs to be in the building that amount of time. And then it's at the discretion of the fixer. So if you want to take a night off, you have to contact the fixer, who has to agree that you're allowed that time off, and he will base that on however many other deps are off that night. Usually fixers will have their rules about how many people can be off on one particular night. So if more than 50% of the band are off, you're not allowed. So the fixer has to agree, and then you have to have your deps in place, guys who will cover for you, who've learnt the show, and they will have to be approved by the musical director who's conducting the show every night, that he's happy for them to do the job. And then it really is a case of you have to weigh it up. You know, when I was doing Priscilla, Queen of the Desert for 3 years, there were certain gigs that I really wanted to do that were one-off gigs that I wasn't allowed to dep out because too many people were off. And you could kind of go, well, this isn't fair. But then you go, well, hang on, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert's paying me X amount of money every year, whereas a one-off gig isn't doing that. And you know, some people don't actually take on shows for that reason. They want to keep themselves open to say yes to everything if they can. But my opinion is there's always going to be clashes. The busier you get, there's always going to be things you're going to have to turn down because you've committed to something else. You know, I've had to turn down other gigs when I've been on tour with Leo Sayer. I've had to turn down other gigs when I've been on tour with Tony Christie. And it's even harder with those guys now because I'm musical director for Leo and I'm musical director for Tony Christie. So, you know, I am still allowed to dep it in extraneous circumstances, you know, but it's shows or tours, you're always going to have clashes, especially the busier you get.
Bit of a curveball question for you here. What are your hobbies away from drumming?
Well, that's a good question. Football, watching rather than play. Used to play when I was at school. I had to choose between football and drumming. I was playing for the school team. I was playing for my local town, and I was playing the drums a lot. And it was kind of like, well, if I injure myself playing football, I can't play the drums anymore. So I chose drumming, and drumming was always my passion. Yeah, I was better at drumming than I was football. It came a bit easy to me, and I'm inherently lazy. So it was like, okay, that's good. But I'm a mad football fan. I watch, you know, I can watch somebody like Lionel Messi play football and get the same buzz as I do watching Buddy Rich play the drums, because for me, they're both geniuses, you know. So anything like that, you know. And then weirdly, like astrology. Although I'm just dipping my toe into that. My wife bought me a really nice telescope for Christmas, which I'm just getting my head around how to use. I've been out, the skies have been so clear recently that I've been getting into that. But I watch all these programs that Brian Cox does and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it blows my mind. I'm fascinated by it. So I'm really into that kind of thing. And then I'm a massive fan of eating and drinking. And me and my wife go out a lot to nice restaurants when we can afford it, and just, you know, that kind of social life, all the stuff we can't do at the moment in lockdown, you know, which is a real shame. But
and that links me nicely to my next question, actually. Probably the most important question of this whole session here. So, what's your favourite biscuit?
So tough. I'll tell you where I've got it to. I've got it to. And this is the working class in me. Bourbons,
right?
Which are the like. I could probably do about 10 before I got in a row before I got sick of eating them. But then dark chocolate digestives.
Yeah,
love those. I had a couple about 2 hours ago with my coffee. You know, I love the posh biscuits, but you know, your B flat bottom of the line biscuit that just does what it says on the tin. Yeah, big fan. So if I had to choose between the two, if it was Desert Island, it's got to be Bourbon. It's got to be the Bourbon.
So my next question there is, so the only other person that said Bourbon so far, Matt Hector, another Ludwig one. So
yeah.
And I totally rinsed him about that. I said to him about where the Bourbon has to be from. Does it have to be from a specific shop, or is it a specific brand? You know, like, does the Smart Price cut it, or does it have to be?
No. It has to be the original. It doesn't have to be the fake ones that are the squarer shape. It has to be the proper original shape. I would say it has to be the shape. I mean, I do most of my shopping at Tesco's, so it's the Tesco's ones that float my boat the best. You know, and the thing about do you know, even the packet size, when you get 2 layers, you get two layers. Yeah. Rather than just the one strip, because are Bourbon a brand in themselves? Do they make their own?
I'm not sure if they're made by, you know, McVitie's or Fox's or something.
Yeah, I think there is a packet. I can visualize it. I don't know who make it, which I always consider the original Bourbons.
Yeah.
But the ones where you get the double layer from Tesco's, and I've got 3 packs of those double layers in the cupboard at the moment. You know, and I can finish a pack of those in a day or two. It's ridiculous.
But are you a dunker?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay.
Absolutely not. And this is the thing. I'm a bit weird like that. So I like things to taste what they taste of. I don't want a Bourbon that tastes a little bit of tea and a little bit of Bourbon. I want to taste the Bourbon and I want to drink the tea.
Okay.
And beans on toast is a no-no. I love beans. I love toast. I have them separate. I have the beans in a bowl. I have the toast separate because I want to taste toast with melted butter on it. I don't want to taste beans in there. I want them separate. It's
I get that.
it's madness. It's
I get
madness.
that.
I mean, it's madness, and it's always been the way. And I used to, when I was a kid, my parents used to have, when they used to take me to a cafe, if the cafe put the beans on the toast, they'd have to send it back because I wouldn't eat it.
You know, a thing similar to that, which does my head in, which you don't see so much anymore, a Coke float.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is
No,
that?
but
How
what
can
they
that even exist?
It's wrong. It's wrong for me as well. Fruit and nut chocolate. I don't want. If I want fruits and nuts, I'll eat some fruit. I'll eat some nuts. I want chocolate. I want to taste chocolate. I don't want anything getting in the way and tainting the chocolate taste. So I won't do that. Even burgers as well. Salad in a burger. If I get a cheeseburger, I want bread, cheese, burger. I don't want lettuce. I don't want tomato. Leave them on the side. I'll get to them if I want a salad. Don't mess with it.
Oh, I love it. And actually, what you said about the branding, Hector sent me a picture the other day of Bourbons after this, and I can tell you now, they're not
Bourbons.
They're not
Bourbons
at all, are they?
They're a cheap imposter. Cheap imposter.
Matt Hector buying cheap Bourbons.
He's not a Bourbon fan. He's not a Bourbon fan. No, sorry.
That's not on. Matt, sorry. Elliot says that's just not on.
No, don't try and take me down with the Bourbon debate.
Wow. Right, I've got one more. So, back to being serious. If you could give one bit of advice to up and coming drummers, what would that one bit of advice be?
Strive to be versatile, conscientious, and nice to everyone you meet. Because even if the latter is really important. Nice as in genuinely nice, not fake nice because I want a gig off you. Just be nice to people. If you find yourself on stage working with somebody that you don't think is cutting it, don't freeze them out. Don't give them bad vibes on stage, because it sounds a bit stereotypical in a sweeping statement, but in my experience, if you're working with somebody that can't play the music as well as you can, and you give them a bad vibe, one day that guy is going to be booking the band and MDing the band, because usually if they can't play, they will put themselves in a position of power so they retain the gig. And if you've been the guy that's snubbed them, they won't book you. Whereas if you've been the guy that's helped them through the gig and saved their ass when it's been going wrong, they want to surround themselves with players who make them sound good. So just be nice to people, be very patient, and versatility in today's climate. You can't just say I'm a jazz drummer. You can't just say I only play rock and roll. You can't say, well, I don't read or I don't play brushes. If you want to actually pay the bills playing the drums, you've got to be able to say yes to everything. So yeah, that would be my advice.
So Elliot, thank you so much for spending your time with us here today at DrumWise. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. All the best and see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.